violated it. There is no strategy. There is no plan. I didn't feel like there was a strategy to begin with when we got into this war. We don't know where we are in the process of the war. Congress and my committee, the Armed Services Committee, has
Hi
not been
guys,
given
welcome
an
to my
exit
channel.
strategy.
Let's
Again, we
challenge
just see,
level
like
up
you do every
together.
single day
Today
in the news,
I'm
more
gonna
service members in harm's
challenge
way, more taxpayer money being spent with no end in
242.
sight, and just a
Let's
continued
do it.
escalation of this conflict for the entire region. And it's not just the U.S. versus Iran at this point. You're seeing Iran bombing other folks in the region, and the escalation of this should be scary to every single American watching it at home, just like we are. Now, the Congress has passed, you probably saw, 2 war powers resolutions. We had 4 Republicans join us, recognizing that we need to reassert our constitutional authority when it comes to declaring war, providing a check on the president. He seems to not care or think that they are at all relevant to his actions here, but the American people are pretty loud and clear that this needs to end. And I'm not sure who he is listening to, certainly not the people, Congress, or even his advisors.
The president, after Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said that Russia and China are enabling Iran, said that he doesn't believe that Xi and Putin are arming Iran. Here's what he said.
I will tell you that President Xi said he will not partake, and President Putin said the same thing. I think,
I need
trust
a
them.
strawberry.
I don't think they want to have me disappointed.
He doesn't think they want to have him disappointed. What do you
Okay,
think
let's
about
go this way.
the degree to which, and there may be a little daylight between what we heard from Hegseth and what the president said intentionally, but how China and Russia are involved with Iran in this war?
Ow!
It's
Stuck
my understanding
again.
that China has helped the Iranians at least with targeting of U.S. assets, which, maybe is not arming Iran, but it's certainly enabling and helping to put U.S. service members in harm's way. So the president might believe that he is a friend in China here. I don't believe that's true. And again, he has not come to the Congress to justify any of this war. He's not come to, has not come to the American people to justify this war. I don't know what he believes, but he's not listening to, I think, the smarter people on this issue, and it's only putting Americans in harm's way.
I got to wrap for the control room, but I want to ask you one more about what we've been reporting this morning about the uncorrected number of deaths from the Department of Defense. This morning, it's at 14, despite the 4 service members killed last weekend. That the number should be at 18. Some injuries have been removed as well.
How
The
about
Department of Defense
watermelon?
says it's a data
Oh yes,
disruption.
it works.
What do you say about this change in the number of deaths attributed to this war?
I think it's an odd time to have a data disruption. I think since the president has re-escalated things and we've lost more service members and we've lost more, more service members have been injured, he owes the American people transparency and accountability. And the fact that the Department of Defense can't keep its website up to date, it's obfuscation at the very least. But it is more of a trend of this president obfuscating what is happening in this region and frankly covering it up because he knows that it is a deeply, deeply unpopular war with the American people.
What are you seeing? Saudi striking Houthis in Yemen. What does this mean for the war?
Yeah, I mean, this marks quite an interesting escalation here, Alex, because I'm just looking at the Saudi Civil Defense X posts, and they basically had put out another announcement and warning for the Yanbu Governorate. And Yanbu Port is super important because it's this release valve for the East-West pipeline carrying crucial oil that goes through the Bab al-Mandab Strait. And now they say the threat has been eliminated. A little earlier this morning, about an hour ago, they said there was a threat in Jazan, which is also very important because it has a lot of downstream oil products that are created there. That threat, again, eliminated. But just to your point around these vessels that have been struck in the Red Sea, look, the Houthis had put up this blockade of any vessel that is related to Saudi Arabia, saying that they will not be able to cross the Bab al-Mandab Strait. This is now the 3rd vessel that was struck, according to the reports that we've been reading. And then the Saudi-led coalition striking Hodeidah port, specific targets there.
Huh?
The Houthis have responded saying they mark this as an escalation for escalation. Now, keeping in mind, Saudi Arabia and the Houthis had signed a truce in 2022. This would mark the very first time that that truce now is being, is majorly under threat. So we know that there's sort of war of words that from both sides, generally speaking, from the United States and Iran. But now the Saudi attacks, specifically in Yemen, really mark sort of an interesting point that we're seeing going into this weekend.
Meanwhile, Iran has been targeting the region
What?
often. How are leaders
Ah,
there
can't
responding?
believe it.
So, I mean, lots of condemnation that we've been seeing and messaging of, we have to see a point of de-escalation. And the last 13 days have been very interesting because you've had 13 consecutive nights of strikes. It seems that CENTCOM has not embarked on any strikes against Iran overnight. So that would mark a significant pause here. But just speaking to what President Trump has been reiterating this week, that they're planning and thinking about striking Iran in a very big way, and Iran consistently saying it's going to be an eye for an eye. That is their doctrine. And Marco Rubio saying, look, it's going to be a head for an eye. We're waiting to see how this transpires. But when I look
No.
at some of the strikes specifically,
This
seen
is
strikes in
not
Syria
an
as well as
easy
Iraq.
level.
There's been major concern in the region that this could widen and
242.
become
Let's
a
try
larger
again.
war where a lot more sort of transpires. The things that are on the table, and a lot of military analysts are talking about this, could we see a ground invasion? President Trump was talking about the Pickaxe Mountain, Kohe Kolang, which is very close to the nuclear facility of Natanz. Is that going to be a target? We've consistently seen targets against some of those port cities in Iran, and the region is just holding its breath, waiting to see what happens next. Because if there is more escalation, if there isn't sort of a diplomatic off-ramp, what does this mean for the wider region? And Alex, importantly, what does it mean for the Strait of Hormuz? What does it mean for Bab al-Mandab Strait, where a new front has clearly opened up again? Also, just I want to mention that any Saudi ships are actually under a blockade, but some Chinese-owned vessels that have come from Saudi ports have been able to negotiate with the Houthis in terms of transiting. So maritime officials are watching this very closely, but there is a threat. It is worrying, and this is going to affect traffic all around sort of the region. And importantly, it's going to spill over into the global economy.
Welcome. We begin with what appears to be a pause in U.S. attacks against Iran. The U.S. military did not announce it was launching strikes on Friday after pummeling Iran for 13 straight nights. This all comes after President Trump met with top advisors and cabinet officials to discuss a potential escalation of the war. That is according to a source. The president says the U.S. is still actively negotiating with Iran after their ceasefire agreement crumbled earlier this month. But he also suggested U.S. forces could press on with their campaign and even expand it. Meanwhile, Saudi Arabia has unleashed strikes on what it described as Houthi targets
Oh
in Yemen.
no.
The Saudi military says it was a
It's,
proportionate response after
okay.
another Saudi ship was attacked by Yemen's Iran-backed Houthis in the Red Sea. Let's bring in CNN's Leila Garagoslu, live from London. It's good to see you. We may finally be seeing a shift around talks, but what's the latest?
Yeah, so there's actually quite a lot of conflicting messaging that we've been hearing over the last nearly 2 weeks, and especially overnight. President Trump has gone back and forth saying, we're open to talks, we are talking, we want to strike harder. So it's very difficult to read the tea leaves in this situation because the president is a bit unpredictable when it comes to this. Now, just last night, he said that the Iranians were actually talking. Take a listen.
And by the way, they are talking to us right now. They'd love to make a deal. I don't think they're ready to. I don't think it's time yet, but I'm willing to listen. But they cannot have a nuclear weapon. We don't want to see Washington, D.C. or any of our cities or Israel or, frankly, the Middle East destroyed with a nuclear weapon because I know the power of nuclear weapons. I see it. I get to see it. We're not going to let that happen.
So The real issue here is that the Iranians have not said that they are talking. They've actually been quite clear that they're open to negotiations, but they're not in the midst of talking. And part of that really comes down to the fact that they're not really seeing a element of trust with the American delegation and President Trump when it comes to any sort of negotiations. They don't believe that they can actually get a deal that leads them to that moment of peace, right? And they don't want a no war, no peace limbo situation once again. That's basically what we saw in that lead up to the MOU. And then, as you know, the MOU was incredibly vague, very difficult to implement. The Iranians don't want that again. Any sort of deal, they say they want to have it be something that achieves lasting peace. Now, the other element that I think is interesting to look at when it comes to President Trump's comments is that he continuously shifts the goals of this war. And this is another thing that the Iranians take issue with. And a number of analysts that I've spoken to over the course of the last few months have said time and time again that that's going to be what makes it very difficult to get some sort of deal or find an off-ramp. Because the goals of the war from the U.S. perspective keep shifting, whether it's Iran's nuclear program or the Strait of Hormuz, it makes it a very difficult situation to negotiate around.
And at the same time, how significant is Saudi Arabia's decision to strike the Houthis?
Yeah, so this is quite significant. We've seen a truce in place between the Houthis in Yemen and Saudi Arabia since about 2022, and that was quite a big deal, really drawing down a years-long conflict. Now we're seeing that flare up again, and it really means that we might see another front to this war off the back of the U.S.-Iran, which once again leads to these concerns of an expansion and escalation throughout the broader region. So we're going to have to watch what happens between Saudi and Yemen very, very closely. If we see things really kick off there, again, it's going to have this massive impact on the region and these trade routes like the Bab el-Mandeb and the broader Red Sea.
The orange.
Begin first in the United States, because U.S. President Donald Trump is now weighing the very dangerous risk of escalating the war with Iran without a clear endgame in sight. The president told Axios he's considering, quote, a massive attack on Iran and is close to making a decision. The president, he also says he doesn't believe the Iranians are ready to make a deal right now because, quote, they haven't received enough pain yet. Iran's military says it launched drones at American targets in Bahrain and Jordan as the current phase of the war drags on. Sirens were also heard in Bahrain earlier. Iranian state media, meanwhile, says a U.S. missile strike targeted Iran's Revolutionary Guard headquarters, and CNN cannot independently verify that claim. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has accepted President Trump's invitation to meet next Tuesday at the White House. The war with Iran is certain to be, as you can imagine, the top of their meeting agenda. Let's get more on all these strands for you. CNN's Julia Benbrook is in Washington for us, and our Fred Blyken, who's reporting extensively, as you know, from inside Iran, joins us now. Julia, let me go to you first, and really on those comments by President Trump, taking this to potentially an unprecedented level when he talks about considering a massive attack bigger than ever before. What more can you tell us about this? Because he has made similar bombastic
with U.S. bases. And this recent escalation kind of started again as Iran had targeted ships in the Strait
Now we
of Hormuz
challenge level 243. Let's go.
The ceasefire was, quote, over. And now in recent days, he's signaled that he is not quite ready to negotiate a new ceasefire agreement at this time. After the days and days of consecutive strikes, he said that they may mean more of the same. He also continued to claim that Iran wants to come to the table and negotiate, but that he believes that they are not quite ready, and reiterated the point that he has made throughout this conflict, that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. And all of this is happening just over a month ago,
My God.
there was
My bad.
what appeared
I
to be a
press on
diplomatic breakthrough, the
and
signing of the memorandum of
wrong
understanding both by the
item.
United States and Iran, which was supposed to kick off this 60-day time
I'll
period for negotiations
fix
for
it.
technical talks
Yes,
on
like
Iran's
this.
nuclear program, addressing issues like the fate of its stockpile of highly enriched uranium. But Trump has also said recently that in his view that the memorandum of understanding is, quote, over as well. But he continues to try and paint an optimistic view, telling Americans that he believes the United States is doing extremely well when it comes to this conflict. Polling, though, pushes back on that a bit. A recent Fox News poll says the majority of Americans, 56%, in their polling do not approve of the U.S.
Nice.
military action that is taking place there in Iran right now. And then on where United States and Israel stand on all of this, as you pointed out, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is expected to meet with Trump at the White House on Tuesday. A lot of conversations as this continues to escalate at this point.
Indeed. Stay with us, Julie. Let me bring in Fred into the conversation. And Fred, you know, as Julie was saying, we're seeing the tit for tat clearly continue now 13 days in. It's looking Bahrain, Kuwait, Jordan, all hearing sirens ringing out this Friday. What are you hearing? You're well tapped into what's happening in Iran. You often report from Tehran. What are you hearing from inside Iran? Are they preparing for this escalation that President Trump is talking about here?
Hi, Lisa. Well, I think they've been preparing for something like this for a very long time. One of the things that we have to understand is when Iran signed the memorandum of understanding, they never really trusted the diplomatic process, and they did say that they would be prepared to retaliate should there be escalation on the part of the United States, especially if you look at, for instance, the military leadership in Iran. They, from the very beginning, said that they would be prepared if there were, as they put it, violations of the ceasefire. And if you look at right now some of the rhetoric that's been coming out of the White House with President Trump saying that he's possibly getting ready for some sort of escalation, the Iranians are clearly saying they're not going to back down in the face of that. They are ready for that. And they also say, quite frankly, that it's not going to change anything as far as the Strait of Hormuz is concerned, that the Iranians are still going to be able to project power into the Strait of Hormuz, control the Strait of Hormuz, at the same time also, of course, project power into the region as well. One of the things that we've been seeing between the Trump administration and the Iranian leadership over the past couple of days is sort of a trading, not just of blows in the military field, but also of threats as well, with President Trump saying that if the Iranians continue to hit, for instance, tankers and other ships in the Strait of Hormuz and in general in the Gulf area, that the U.S. would start hitting bridges and possibly power plants for each ship that's it. Well, the Iranians have said if the U.S. are going to hit critical infrastructure inside Iran, that the Iranians would start doing exactly the same thing, for instance, in the Gulf region. You look, for instance, at energy infrastructure there. You look at desalination plants on both sides of the Gulf. Obviously, that's something that could lead to a very dangerous situation in that area. And certainly also something that the Gulf states are very concerned about as well. The Iranians say the core for them right now, to if there's a chance to get this memorandum of understanding back on track, is the situation in the Strait of Hormuz. They're taking a very hard line. They're saying they're taking a very hard line on controlling the Strait of Hormuz, controlling the shipping lanes through the Strait of Hormuz, defining those shipping lanes, and essentially saying that they believe that the memorandum of understanding gives them the sole power to define how the Strait of Hormuz is governed, at least in the first part, until a broader agreement can be reached. Now, there was 2 weeks of two sides trading blows there in the Gulf area.
100%.
And of course, all of this, Isa,
all
one of the things we have to keep
the
in mind, this is also having a devastating effect on the population in Iran.
I guess they will offer me another collection.
Having trouble
now we
with the economy
challenge
as well. A lot of
level
civilians also have been killed, the Iranians
244.
say,
Let's go.
in strikes that the U.S. has conducted over the past 2 weeks. So it seems as though the longer this goes on and the more devastating the strikes on both sides get, the more difficult it could be to get back to diplomacy, even though Iran's foreign ministry has said that they are still open for diplomacy and continue to consider that a viable avenue.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought it back to the people. So important. We often forget, of course, what they're going through inside Iran. But quite rightly, as you just said and Julia just said, we're hearing more retaliation, more escalation rather than diplomacy right now. Fred, great to see you. Julia, thank you very much indeed. Really appreciate it. And you've heard the fears that there may soon be a major price
continued
surge
challenge.
in the global oil markets.
So my
Oil prices
second
actually dipping a bit
time
today below that
to
$100
try
barrel,
level
with the newest supply concern
244.
moving forward.
Let's do
Houthi,
it.
we're talking about this yesterday, if you remember, at the top of the show. Houthi blockade in the Red Sea. You're seeing now where the prices are just below $100 or so barrel for Brent crude, as well as WTI crude. I do have some breaking news coming in to CNN, and actually breaking news from The Hague.
The war in Iran nears its 6th month now, and after the fragile ceasefire between the U.S. and Iran crumbled, President Trump is now weighing options for expanding U.S. military operations against Iran. Joining me now, Democratic New Jersey Congressman Josh Gottheimer, who's a member of the House Intelligence Committee. Congressman, thanks so much for taking the time.
Thanks for having me, Jim. Appreciate it.
So CNN and others have reported that the CIA, the DIA have concluded that the kind of bombing, the kind of airstrikes that the U.S. is currently carrying out are unlikely to shift Iran's position. Given that, do you see any evidence that escalating military action, as the president seems to be considering, will change that calculus at all?
I mean, part of the challenge here, as you're pointing out, is one, it's unclear what the ultimate objectives are, right, in the conflict, which is why we voted yesterday on the War Powers Resolution, basically saying to the president, you've got to come to Congress and the American people and explain what the objectives are and ask for an authorization of force. We do know, so unclear whether is the objective nuclear, is it to go after their ballistic missiles, their drone program, their terror proxy program, and of course, the Strait of Hormuz, which has now been blocked and which is where the major focus of recent days has been, right? This opening up the straits. And that was not an issue when this conflict started, but it's become an issue. And the second thing with all of this is like what resources are needed to achieve those objectives, and how do we achieve those objectives if we don't know what they are, right? And that's been part of the great frustration here of what are we trying to get at, what do you need to get at it, and what's the ultimate goal? At the same time, if they're bombing ships in the Strait, or if you've got the Houthis now going after ships in the Red Sea, you can't just let that happen and go unanswered, right? So if they kill Americans, they attack our allies. They've been dispatching drones and attack our allies and our bases. You can't just sit there. You obviously got to deal with that and respond as a commander-in-chief. But you still don't know. But if you don't know what the ultimate objective is, it's hard to run any kind of conflict.
Well, those objectives have changed based on the president's own public statements. You bring up the war powers votes, but at the end of the day, these are symbolic. Because you can't get sufficient number of votes, but also because you have the administration game.
Okay, no problem. Let's try again. Oh, it's hard. The word is saying this level is a hard one. So let's try the third time. Let's go.
Killed Americans, attacked our bases, attacked our allies, right? They fly under the banner of death to America, right? They are the enemy. However, the fact that many of us are saying, but Mr. President, you've got to actually lay out your objectives here to the country and to Congress. You can't just go on forever without asking us for an authorization of force or a declaration of war. That sends a very strong message, I believe, and that is the goal here, to say to the president, you've got to lay out your objectives here so that we know what we're trying to achieve. And all we're seeing, the public sees, are just higher gas prices, and obviously we lost servicemen and women, which is is heartbreaking, and so you've got a lot on the table here that needs to be addressed, and you can't just throw out a few tweets and hope that solves the problem.
Speaking of messages, the president just a short time ago seemed to absolve Russia and China of any responsibility for any help that they. Iran, China has been offering their
it's
support.
really not
Why is the
easy.
president put
So
out a message like
this
this
is
now,
my
saying,
first
hey, my
time
friends Xi
to
and
challenge
Putin,
the
they
same
tell me they're
level.
not supplying
Let's
anything,
try.
so I'm going to take them at their word.
Well, I don't know what's motivated the president to do that. I can't really comment further, given my seat on the Intelligence Committee and information that I know. But I'll just say that this brings up a larger question of who are our friends here and who aren't, right? And clearly, the Chinese and the Russians are not our friends in all this, and they've over the years been big supporters of Iran and who's our enemy, right? So you've got Iran, Russia, China, North Korea, who have worked together against the United States, against our servicemen and women, against our freedom and our democracy. That is true, and we know that. So pandering to them at any moment, especially in the middle of this conflict, makes no sense to me.
Okay, I want to ask you about the
Let's go
election system
first.
error, a big one in your home state of New Jersey. According to your governor, more than 6,000 non-citizens were mistakenly added to voter rolls in New Jersey, and some 400 cast improper ballots. Your colleague, Senator Andy Kim, said someone should be fired. But the key question is, how did this happen, and are you confident it is now fixed?
Well, I'm confident the governor's all over it. I know they're conducting an investigation. This happened under the prior governor under the administration. So, I think right now our current governor is focused on one thing, getting to the bottom of it, addressing it. I'd say the big story. A company called Nvidia, which is a French company, who, by the way, has
4
massive
times.
contracts
Now
with
I'm
the federal
challenged
government.
the 5th time.
Border Patrol,
The same
FBI,
level,
with the Defense Department.
244.
When you get TSA
Let's
pre-clearing
go.
at the airport, they have that contract as well. The machines that you stick your ID into and screen you are made by this French company, which is selling to a Spanish company. They were mentioned in the China report. So there's a lot of issues with this company, and I'd like to know what other glitches are out there. Are they protecting our data? Why are we handing over all this driver's license data and all this data to this French and soon-to-be Spanish company that has had issues with the CCP, with the Chinese government? Like, that to me is the big question I'd like to get an answer to.
Yeah, a vulnerability at a minimum. Josh Gottheimer, thanks so much for joining.
Thanks for having me.
Happening now, we're following news strikes between the U.S. and Iran as officials from both sides are now disputing a report in the New York Times that Tehran rejected a ceasefire proposal from President Trump. But this hour, no ceasefire appears in place. The U.S. launching its 13th straight night of attacks, while Iranian state media says Tehran targeted U.S. assets in Bahrain and Jordan. Earlier, sirens were heard blaring over Bahrain, and Kuwait's military now says it's intercepting hostile targets from Iran. Questions are hanging over President Trump's next move after he told Axios, "I am considering a massive attack bigger than ever before." CNN's Betsy Klein is live at the White House with more. Betsy, that kind of warning would carry a lot of weight, except we've heard many warnings from the president where he's made them and then backed away. So what are we making of these conflicting statements about the ceasefire and about this threat from the president?
Well, Brianna, if you're trying to make sense of both the state of this conflict and the strategy going forward, you are getting very mixed signals right now. As you just mentioned, President Trump telegraphing this idea of a massive attack. This is something that he has threatened before. He has said he could go after critical infrastructure, things like roads, bridges, Karg Island, that key oil hub, as well as Pickaxe Mountain, which is believed to be an Iranian nuclear according to 2 sources, that the strikes that the U.S. is currently carrying out
I'll
are
try
unlikely to
the
shift Iran's
6th
negotiation
time
position.
for the same
Meanwhile, the New
level.
York Times reports that Iran
It's
has
a little
rejected
bit hard.
a ceasefire proposal that was delivered to Tehran by Iraq's prime minister, who recently met here at the White House with President Trump. According to Iranian officials, they did not want this temporary deal that did not ultimately resolve the idea of who has control over the Strait of Hormuz, which has been really at the center of this conflict. Now, Iran state media is pushing back. They say that this is, quote, diversionary and misleading. A U.S. official also saying that this New York Times reporting is, quote, not accurate. But in President Trump's words, Iran, he says, is not ready yet to get back to a diplomatic solution, to come to the negotiation table. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt also very notably telling the Wall Street Journal that the U.S. strikes will continue until they come to the table in what President Trump deems a meaningful way. No real clarity there. But the president also said today that he doesn't believe that China and Russia, two key U.S. rivals, are providing weapons to Iran. He did issue this warning in a new post to social media saying, quote, two major countries that people speak of often in terms of Iran are, in my opinion, not participating. If they did, it would be very bad for them, certainly not in their best interests. Of course, we should also note that this directly contradicts testimony from Pentagon official Pete Hegseth. He said that China and Russia are at different levels enabling some of Iran's activity.
And Betsy, the 4 soldiers who were killed over the weekend have actually been removed from the Pentagon's list of casualties. They were on the website Wednesday. It was listed as 18 who had died in this war with Iran. Thursday, it was at 14. What are you learning about this?
Well, this was first brought to our attention by a report in the New York Times. And the New York Times reporting indicated, according to 3 military officials, that there had been some internal disagreement about whether those 4 U.S. service members who were killed over the weekend should be included in the count because they were all killed after President Trump signed that ceasefire deal, which, as we know, has fallen apart. But a Pentagon spokesperson providing some clarity. They say that this is a temporary data disruption and it will be resolved. But we just checked right before I came on air that count right now.
After 6 times trying, I finally passed it. This really a hard one.
Shooting up as
you can see the fiery remains, how 11 people managed to make it out alive, and wildfires trigger a massive evacuation of an entire
Now we are
challenge
level 245. Let's do it.
Today, I'm John Berman with Sarah Seiner. This is CNN News Central.
breaking news this morning, the U.S. and Iran trading strikes overnight, and conflicting reports. Did Iran reject a U.S. proposal for a new ceasefire? The New York Times says yes. Iranian state media says no. But right now, there's no side. Either side is backing down and heading towards diplomacy. Iran claiming it targeted U.S. military bases in multiple countries in the Middle East overnight, while U.S. Central Command said it carried out its 13th straight night of attacks on Iran. Military targets, it says. Iran state media reports at least 4 people were killed. President Trump told Axios he's considering a, quote, massive attack on Iran, bigger than ever before, he says. He does not sound ready to cut a deal.
We're doing very well against the Islamic Republic of Iran. We're doing extremely well. They would like to do something, but I say they're not ready yet. They need more of the same.
CNN's Betsy Klein live for us at the White House this morning. Where are we here this morning?
Well, Sarah, it's been 13 consecutive nights of these U.S. strikes on Iran, and this diplomatic off-ramp appears to be further away than ever. And it comes as we are learning, according to 2 sources familiar with the matter, that U.S. intelligence agencies have recently assessed that these types of strikes that the U.S. has been carrying out against Iran are unlikely to shift Iran's negotiating position. Meanwhile, the New York Times, as you mentioned, reports that Iran has rejected on Thursday a ceasefire proposal that was carried to Tehran by Iraq's prime minister, who recently met here at the White House with President Trump. Now, we don't know exactly the substance of what was in that ceasefire proposal. However, Iranian officials tell the Times that they were not interested in a temporary deal that would not resolve the question of who has control over the Strait of Hormuz, of course, that critical oil thoroughfare. Meanwhile, Iranian state media pushing back on that. They say that that report is diversionary and misleading. So I've asked the White House for clarity this morning on whether they think Iran is taking this seriously. Haven't heard back yet, but in President Trump's view, as you saw, Iran is not ready yet, in his words. The president has limited options here. He can continue to the status quo of these strikes that we're seeing every single night, or he can escalate with the possibility of boots on the ground. That is something that he has telegraphed is also a possibility. But Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt told the Wall Street Journal in what I think was a very revealing comment that the strikes are going to continue until they come to the table in what President Trump deems a meaningful way. Again, according to Leavitt, interesting wording there. But we know that the president is increasingly frustrated by this conflict. He had promised that it would be over within a matter of weeks. It's now hitting its 5-month mark. The price of gas steadily ticking up, now $4.10 a gallon. All of this weighing on President Trump with just 3 months to go to those midterm elections. Sarah.
Former U.S. ambassador to the European Union. Ambassador Sondland, good morning. There is reporting the president, and it's visible, is growing frustrated with Iran and its extended conflict, 13 straight nights of U.S. action against it. And our friend Barak Ravid at Axios is reporting the president is close to deciding on what Barak reports would be a massive attack on Iran to try to change the nature of the situation. What do you think a massive attack on Iran would accomplish?
So scary.
Well, before I respond to that question, you know, the president did make an honest effort to try and make a deal. And the people with whom he was dealing, as we discussed a few days ago, John, are sincere in wanting to eradicate the IRGC and bring the Iranian people into the community of nations. The problem is they don't have any power, they don't have any guns, they don't have any money. And so, as sincere as President Trump was in trying to make peace, it's not going to happen. And now, to your point, he is surging an incredible amount of U.S. Armada into the venue, into the theater, and he is going to have a lot of options. And I think the Israelis are going to join this as well. There is going to be probably another round of leadership decapitation. That I don't want to be in Iran right now because I think the president is done with the peace track at this point.
And now we are challenged level 246. Let's
Israel has not been involved the last few weeks directly, but I will note that in the first few months of the war, when it was the United States and Israel engaged in very regular, very serious attacks, it didn't do what the president wanted it to do. So why would it this time?
Well, remember, you have 90 million people in Iran, and only maybe 1 million of them are diehard IRGC people. There are many other IRGC people that are just what you would call ordinary soldiers, that the minute there's an uprising, they will join that uprising. And this is one of the main reasons why our Second Amendment in the United States is so important. If the average Iranian had household weapons, an uprising would be far more possible than it is today. They don't have the guns. They don't have any way of... Yes.
Do you want to... Okay. Well, yes. First of all, I'm going to come back to this. But my question is why would it work this time when it didn't work the first time? What would be different now, do you think?
Oh, tomato again.
Well, here's what's different now. They were doing pinprick strikes while the negotiations were going on. In other words, John, they were dealing with the more moderate factions of the Iranian government.
But not before that. But not before that. We've done, you know, we did what the president called massive attacks before. So if that didn't achieve, because it hasn't achieved what the president wanted it to, why would it now?
Oh, it's a peach.
Well, first of all, I will criticize the president and the administration with due respect that we did not obliterate anything. we slowed things down and we set things back a long way. This time, with what's going into the theater, once the president gives the green light, if he really unleashes the force that we're massing, we will obliterate them. We absolutely will. There'll be no doubt about it. And that's a political decision that the president has to make. And I think they're gearing up so that he has the option to make that decision. But no, I agree with those on your air who said the obliteration has not occurred. It has not occurred yet. But it will.
Stuck
It sounds like what you're saying, though, is if the United States does do this again, this massive attack, it needs to be even more than the first time around. If the first one didn't do what you say, so this one needs to be bigger.
Yes.
And in regards to the Iranians, who you were right.
Absolutely, and it needs.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. We must have a little delay. I'm in Europe. It's also going to require peeling another layer off the onion, which is another level of regime decapitation. There are a few people that I'm sure they're going to spare who they know their hearts and minds are in the right place. But the others, like, I wouldn't want to be Vahadi right now, who's running the IRGC. He's got a big target on his back, and they know where he is.
This level is very
leave this hanging out there. It sounds like you were also saying. I think the United States should be more directly, overtly involved with trying to have some kind of uprising.
Now it's challenge level 247. Let's study.
Perhaps you misunderstood my point. I'm saying the Iranian people are incapable of uprising, or rising up, I should say, under the current scenario. They have no weapons. What they need to have is they need to have sympathetic members of the IRGC who will turn around and not shoot them when they start these uprisings. And we're not there yet because the militants are still in control of the Iranian Republican Guard.
We will see what happens next and if it changes things. Former Ambassador Gordon Sondland, always good to talk to you. Thanks for coming on this morning.
With what appears to be a pause in U.S. attacks against Iran, the U.S. military did not announce it was launching strikes on Friday. This is after pummeling Iran for 13 straight nights. And we're also not getting any reports of Iranian attacks on U.S. allies in Bahrain, Jordan, or Kuwait overnight. Now, all of this comes after President Trump met with top advisors and cabinet officials to discuss a potential escalation of the war. That's according to a source. The president says the U.S. is still actively negotiating with Iran after their ceasefire agreement crumbled earlier this month. But he also suggested U.S. forces could press on with their campaign and even expand it.
There's a military exit where we just keep going just the way we are, and we can even make it a heavier dose, and it's knocking out everything they have. Or there's a smarter strategy, and that's you make a deal, and they want to make a deal. I just don't think they're ready yet.
I want to bring in now Leila Gargazo. She is joining us live from London. So we're hearing from our reporters in the White House, Leila, that President Trump is weighing the possibility of a massive attack. I mean, what could that mean after nearly 2 weeks of punishing airstrikes?
Yeah, so it could mean a range of things. He's said over the last 2 weeks that he could hit civilian infrastructure like bridges or desalination plants. He's also toyed with the idea of hitting Mount Kolang, or as people call it, Pickaxe Mountain, which is part of the Natanz facility. So there could be quite a lot of different options here. The U.S. generally over the last 2 weeks has been working to degrade Iran's military capability and loosen its control over the Strait of Hormuz. So much of those strikes that we've seen in these 14 days have really been in that stretch along the southern area of Iran, the defensive arc. He could widen that out, go back to hitting places like Tehran and really focusing again on the capital. So there's a lot to work with, I guess, in terms of strike targets. That being said, he's also had conflicting statements where he said that, you know, they could be talking, the Iranians are talking, he's open to the idea of diplomatic negotiations. So it's unclear what next steps he's going to take. Now, a lot of the analysts and experts that I've been speaking to over the last 2 weeks have said that if the U.S. is looking to have Iran capitulate via more airstrikes and an expanded campaign, That's very
Too
unlikely.
bad.
In kind, they're not going to
Okay,
sit,
I'll
negotiate, and they're not
challenge
going to move those
again
red
this
lines
level
around things like their nuclear program,
247
which is what
later.
President Trump says
Thank
he
you
wants
for
heard.
joining us.
So it's
Thank
unclear
you.
what
See
a
you next
actual
time.
expansion of